Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon. On behalf of Net Zero Carbon Events, I very warmly welcome all of you to today's webinar with the Javits Center and their roadmap towards net zero. As you know, we have started this webinar series in order to help signatories to complete their goals of publishing their own roadmaps. We, as you know, have already run 2 webinars on this topic together with RX and Freeman. And today we have the pleasure of welcoming Jaše Dadić, who is the Director of Energy and Sustainability at the Javits Center in New York. I very much thank Jaše for the readiness to be our speaker today. It's really a great pleasure. And I know, Jaše, you guys just came out of the Nest Summit in New York, which is, of course, a huge event series of different events in line with the New York Climate Action Week. So I'm aware that quite a lot of events were organized at the Javits Center. So maybe perhaps after you finish your presentation, we can briefly talk about this as well. I very much welcome everyone to this webinar and would like to ask you to mute yourself so that Jaše is not disturbed by the background noise. And you, of course, have all the time in the world to ask Jaše questions after her presentation. So it will be around 20 minutes or so, and then we can have the Q&A. So thank you so much for joining, everyone. And Jaše, I would like to give the floor to you.
Thank you so much, Alex. I appreciate it. Very excited for this conversation and excited to share where we are and what are our plans to get to the point of net zero. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time from your busy schedule to join the conversation today. I'm going to share my screen and then we'll get started. Alex, is it looking good on your end?
Yeah, now it's perfect.
Awesome. Wonderful. So as many of you might have noticed, the Javits Center released the Path to Net Zero report last year in December as part of our commitment to the Net Zero Carbon Events Pledge. And our approach to it was understanding first off where we are, and then how do we get to that point of net zero. So this, what we call, is our plan of the plan, because this was our very first step, and there is still a lot of work that needs to be done. But that being said, I'm very excited to talk about what we have done over the past years and what we have accomplished first, and then I'll dive into where we are heading. So as many of you might already know, Javits Center opens its doors in 1986 with 2.1 million square feet. And sustainability was not an element at that point, which was not a priority. However, between the period of 2009 to 2014, Javits Center went through a lot of renovations. Some part of it was because of the regulations, and some part of it was due to the Hurricane Sandy, which was in 2012. And when Javits Center was looking at it in terms of the renovation, how do we build back better from the impacts of the Hurricane Sandy, we started looking at it in a different way, where how can things look better for our future generations? What elements can we start weaving in? And at that point, there was a regulation which required us to install the green roof.
There was a Q&A, just while I remember.
Thank you. At that point, there was a requirement which required Javits Center to install the 6.75 acres green roof on our existing building. And that involved installing a 1.5-inch sedum roof, which is a succulent plant that absorbs water. So during that time, when we were going through the renovation, we started addressing that energy efficiencies, diverting of the polluted stormwater, and it was just by chance that the architect who was helping us in planning for this renovation, his wife was a bird lover. So she asked the main architect who was working with Javits Center at that point that you should encourage Javits Center to install a bird-friendly glass. Because at that time, the entire building, if you have come to Javits Center, you might have noticed that the entire building is full of glass panels. And at that point, the glass panels were the reflective glass panels. And what happened was the migratory birds, which a lot of the birds come through Javits Center because this is the path for their migration. And they would just dive into the Javits Center's building and have that collision. But that conversation ended up where we decided to change the reflection glass with a bird-friendly glass. And it reduced the collision victims for the birds significantly. And I'm very proud to share that the data indicates that we have reduced that bird collision by over 90%. So Javits at that point used to be called the bird killer, and now we are a proud bird habitat of various different species. And in fact, last week during Climate Week, we touched 70 different species. We have identified those species on our rooftop. Back in 2015, when it started, we identified 15 bird species. And at that point, Javits Center was but demonstrating itself as an economic engine and was not able to gain the traction and the recognition that they were hoping for. But the day that they shared that we have 15 bird species on our green roof, all the news channels, all the camera people wanted to be on our roof. And that split that channel for us, that we were seen as as a center which is working towards biodiversity. And that's what started Javits Center's sustainability journey. So we started publishing our sustainability report in 2017. And over the years, we in fact just published our 4th one earlier this year. Over the years, that became the foundation. And then there were multiple different elements which built upon that and helped us in reducing our energy consumption and in fact, reducing the urban heat island. So all the neighboring area for Javits Center, there is a temperature reduction by 1 degree Celsius because of the 6.75 acres roof installation on our roof. We did actually, before I move to the next point, in 2021, our CEO, Alan Steele, was involved in the Net Zero Carbon Events pledge formulation, and we are one of the proud signatories of the NZCE pledge, and we are committed to it, and we are committed to reducing our emissions by half by 2030 and leading to our 100% reduction by 2050. There have been multiple areas which we have worked on and have realized that we are working towards reduction through these different action areas. So last year, when we were working on our action plan and how will we get there, we used the same framework that NZCE recommends. We used the United Nations 2030 Agenda and the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals as a way for us to start kind of putting those pieces in place. And that's what you see here. We are currently addressing 9 out of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We are different action areas that the NZCE uses in their framework. And we do plan to use the greenhouse gas protocol for our greenhouse gas emissions inventory as well. As we started working on it, we also wanted to share that responsibility that we have locally within the state and within the city as well. So we are working on all the regulations very closely with the state and the city as well. And some of it we are actually surpassing as well. The events industry, we are working towards, we know that the events industry is asking the clients who are coming to Javits Center, they're asking us that how can we make the events more sustainable? How can we make the events more energy responsible? And waste has been one of the biggest trends that we have identified in the past year and a half, and have been working significantly on reducing our waste, while also making sure that we are doing our part to reduce the carbon emissions from our energy consumption as well. Here, I wanted to dive into where our emissions are and how do we plan to reduce those by 50% by 2030. So our Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, the approach that we wanted to take is making sure that we define those boundaries clearly. And in the past year, we have been able to identify our Scope 1 and Scope 2 clearly. And we have been collecting data. And currently, our data has been collected since 2012. Because we wanted to make sure all the renovations and all the progress that we've made over the past decade is captured in it. And we are able to count it towards that reduction goal that we will set in place. So we recognize that there is some gap in our data that we have currently. We want to make sure that we continue working on making sure that data that we have is more robust to ensure that we are able to calculate all our emissions in a better and a concise manner. In terms of the Scope 2, I feel Scope 2 emissions, we have a very good track already, and we have all the emissions recorded since 2012 to current. The Scope 3 emissions, as many of you might agree with me, is that's where it starts getting more complex, because that's where the Scope 1 is all the direct emissions where we have more control over it, and we can make those changes on our end. Scope 2 is all the electricity that we are consuming within Javits Center. Scope 3 is all the indirect emissions which are coming through Javits, either via upstream or downstream. There are 15 categories of it. Some of it we have identified, but there is still a lot more that needs to be done. And the reason for it is because we do not have that direct control over the indirect emissions, because the decision makers are our clients. We are not the decision makers. We encourage them to reduce, and we provide resources to them that how can they reduce on their end. But again, we are not the decision makers on that. So that's where it's a little bit more complicated. However, we wanted to make sure that we are able to communicate that our net zero commitment is way more stringent than just getting to a point of carbon neutral, because we do not want to be just at the point of where we are getting to using the carbon offsets and getting to the point of being a carbon neutral organization. We want to make sure we are net zero, and we want to do all the reductions that we can on our end and change in our operations to get to that point of actual net zero emissions and decarbonize our operations and our consumption. Here we are talking about the data maturity that I did mention a few minutes back on another slide, where we understand that there are gaps, but we are working on making sure that we get to that point where we use the data where we do not have to use a lot of assumptions. And I'm referring to the data hierarchy here. We currently want to make sure that our data is mostly primary. We do have some of our data which is secondary, and we want to eliminate all the assumptions that we have and be more specific with our data. Decarbonization for the Scope 1 and Scope 2, as I mentioned, that we are currently collecting the data, installing everything that we need to do on our end to ensure that the data quality is better. By next year, we want to make sure that we are measuring and monitoring all of our data, tracking the emissions for Scope 1 and Scope 2. 2030 will be the year where we want to make sure that our systems are in place and there is that feedback loop which is installed and in progress already to make sure we continue improvising on that data collection and addressing those loops wherever we have any issues to get to the point of net zero by 2050. Here we are talking about the decarbonization levers. These are some of the levers that we identified, which we feel are very important for us to address. And the most important one for us is energy optimization. We want to ensure that we are optimizing the energy consumption at all different levels, be it the renewable energy resources, be it the demand response when we have to reduce our power to make sure that the power grid that we are associated with in the city is not heavily impacted during the peak load days. So we are working on energy optimization. And we do have, as many of you might already know, we do have the solar panels on our roof installed, and we are hoping to energize them and start utilizing them before the end of the year. Electrification is another one. We currently do not own a lot of vehicles, but we want to make sure whatever we own or will own in the future, we electrify all of that. And not only the vehicles, even all of our operations within Javits is all based on electricity. We do not use a lot of the natural gas. We are currently using gas only for our kitchens. And the heaters are also, the water heaters, they are also all electric, except for the ones in the kitchen. We understand that the building in itself has some embodied carbon, and that the 2021 expansion that we built, we worked on it diligently to ensure that there is reduction in the embodied carbon during the construction of that expansion building as well. And we will continue working on reducing our embodied carbon content from our own building. The refrigerants, as many of you might already know, that is one of the areas where many organizations struggle with because it is the Scope 1, and however, you still need it. So we are working on eliminating all the refrigerants that have higher global warming potential and working on replacing them with the lower ones. And we also make sure that at the end of its use phase, we are capturing all the refrigerants and recycling it, so it's not going back into the atmosphere. We want to work on very closely with the grid to make sure that we have that independent capacity. We are working on battery energy storage system also, where we will have our own microgrid. But at the same time, we want to make sure that we are working closely with our utility companies as well. Scope 3 is, as I mentioned, we will work on it, and we do have a plan in place because some of the areas for Scope 3, we know that as a venue, we have to work with our clients very closely. But our approach to Scope 3, instead of directly addressing it, we want to go through a materiality assessment process with our stakeholders, both internal and external, to ensure that we address all the areas which are important for our stakeholders. And then we kind of tackle that by identifying which are those indirect emissions, which are the most important ones for Javits Center to reduce. And we will make sure that we are using the NZCE focus areas as well. So some of the Scope 3 boundaries levers that we have already identified, but again, this is going to go through materiality assessment to make sure that these are the correct areas that we will be working on, includes the embodied carbon in the venue building, the transmission and the distribution losses, the water, the waste, the venue generates through its events, and the staff travel and the accommodations as well. What's next for Javits Center is making sure that we continue working towards calculating our scope 1 and scope 2, and then creating that plan to reduce that. And we do plan to publish our greenhouse gas inventory once complete. As mentioned, we will conduct a materiality assessment to identify the correct categories with the help of our internal and external stakeholders for all of our scope 3 emissions. We are not going to dive into all 15 categories. We want to be very careful into what we take on the responsibility towards. We will continue working towards renewable energy production and procurement strategies, and we will continue working towards identifying the emissions and reducing our embodied carbon. And we will continue publishing our findings and sharing it with all external stakeholders as well. Some of the activities in 2024, our sustainability report was published earlier this year. If you haven't had a chance to take a look at it, please take a look at it. It's a biannual sustainability report, includes all of our work from 2022 and 2023. The solar energy panels, they are ready. They have the installation has been completed. We are just waiting on some final permitting, and as soon as we have those permitting in place, we are ready to go live with our renewable energy power via the solar panels that we have on our roof. Battery energy storage system is also in progress, and we are hoping to have it by earlier next year. And we are exploring some other renewable energy innovations as well. We do want to continue working with our events to support them in getting to their net zero operations as well, because there are multiple events who are coming to us with the same agenda, that they want to get to that net zero point, but how do they get it? And that collaboration between the show organizers, the show management, and the venue is so crucial to make sure that we get to that point of net zero collectively. It cannot be done in a silo. It has to be the collaboration. We have to work together. There is another element that we are working on, installing scrubbers for generators to make sure that all the harmful emissions, especially the NOx emissions, are captured before they are emitted into the atmosphere. That's our plan, and hopefully we will continue working towards it, and we will share all the details with everybody. Any questions, anybody?
Thanks, Yashi. Really super exciting to see, and I especially like the fact from the bird killer to bird habitat. This is very catchy, and
that's
really
one of my favorite stories. Yes,
exactly. It's a nice story. So no wonder the press picked it up and wanted to be with you. I do have already. I'm not sure. Just a second. If anyone who has a question, please just. You might want to raise your hand and speak up. It's not a problem. We will be happy to pass it on to Yashi. So far, Elizabeth. Okay, Elizabeth, please go ahead.
Good morning, and thank you, Yashi. That was an excellent presentation. I love all the detail you went through, and looking at every aspect of it, and the focus and prioritization that you're obviously looking at is fantastic. A question on your boundaries, where you mentioned that the venue waste is included, but the production waste is excluded. How are you drawing the line between those two?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for your kind note. And that question is a very important one. And we had multiple discussions on that particular topic. And the reason was that whatever waste is brought in, we do not have any control over it. So that's where we said that venue waste for the operations, we will work with our clients. We'll continue helping them with different resources, with different strategies, and based on their requirements, we currently are able to offer everything from back of house sorting to front of house sorting to the infrastructure, different types of bins in place. That's why we decided to include that one, but the production waste is not directly associated with us. So we wanted to be a little bit careful in that before we could commit to it. And as I mentioned, we would like to go through that materiality assessment and understand it a little bit more from our stakeholders also. What is important for them before we commit to it.
Yes, totally understand. It's definitely, that's the waste of the shows will definitely be a team effort, I think, and a lot of collaboration between so many of the groups that are on the call today.
Absolutely. And like when we talk about our own operations waste, the admin waste is just such a small fraction of the total waste that is generated at Javits through the events. And none of it is Javits direct waste. It's waste at Javits because of the event which was there.
Understood. Thank you.
And Yashay, maybe a question from my side also, because you've mentioned the collaboration between you and as a venue and organizers who bring events into your venue is key, which is of course understandable. Do you feel the change that customers are asking more now in terms of sustainability requirement? And what kind of questions do you get today? Especially in terms of data collection, which you probably didn't get in the past. And a question also here, are you able to provide all this data they are asking for, or do you have some difficulty still in one area or two, and how you're dealing with this maybe?
Absolutely. So Alex, we have more and more clients coming to us, and we've seen actually a 25 to 30% increase from 2023 to 2024 in clients who are requesting us that post-sustainability matrix, where we provide them with all of the utility data, including the electricity consumption, the water consumption, the gas consumption, and obviously the waste breakdown. The clients are asking for the waste diversion rates. They want to understand, because they themselves have so many commitments, and for their own reporting, they want to make sure that they have all that data. So we have a mechanism, we have a process in place to share that reported, those numbers with our clients. It takes us about, once there is an event at Javits Center, it can take us anywhere between 30 to 45 days to provide them with the data that they are requesting for, because it takes about 30 to 40 days for us to get that data from our utility companies and from our waste hauler as well.
Right. Thanks, Yashi. There is just a second. There is a question of Tiago. Tiago, would you like to ask your question live? Probably not, but then I will read it aloud. So thank you for the presentation. Could you share more details about the low GWP refrigerants used? Because for us, it's a big challenge. Options for low GWP refrigerant for big system.
Yes. So what we are doing is our engineers here at Javits are making sure that we are following those guidelines, and we are eliminating the R22 from all our equipment that we have here and replacing it with the more environmentally friendly ones, which are rolling out. So we follow the guidelines, and one of the key important elements in this is when we are decommissioning something, we ensure that proper protocol is followed. Even if it's our vendor, we want to make sure that during the capture of that refrigerant, there are no leaks and there are no emissions. And for that, we also ensure that there is regular servicing as well. So Javits did go through some change in the equipment, and currently we have pretty much all new equipment from the past 10 years, and ensuring, because one of the problems with the old refrigerant equipment is also that the product or the equipment in itself is older. And the other ones which had higher GWP refrigerants were used in those. But as the regulations have changed internationally, that product quality or the product requirements have also changed. So it has taken us some time, and there is still more work to be done, but it was a more step-by-step approach and a phased approach instead of just changing it in one go. Hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Yashi. Yeah, indeed. I hope, Tiago, your question is answered. Otherwise, you might want to specify it in the chat once more. And I'm reaching out to everyone else in case anyone else has a question for Yashi. Otherwise, just before then wrapping up, I would like maybe, Yashi, to ask you the question about the last week's Nest Summit. We know that, of course, as I've mentioned in the beginning, the Javits Center was hosting the Nest Summit itself and also some other events in connection with sustainability. Just out of curiosity, not only mine, but I suppose also from everyone else's, how was it? And maybe you can share a couple of interesting insights you've learned during last week.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Alex, to answer your question, it was an exciting week to see thousands and thousands of people gather in the city. No matter where you went, there were people walking around with the SDG pins, the one with the United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Everywhere, everybody was wearing it. And we often talk about that, how we need some action as a society, how we need our leaders to come together, and we need to make progress in the climate space. And this was an amazing example of leaders coming together, having those conversations, making more of those collaborations, sharing what can be done. And we are very proud to be sharing that we worked on the waste agenda very deeply. And waste has been, as I mentioned, that it has been a priority for Javits Center and the waste stations that we created. So there were those waste collection bins throughout the 3 floors that we had at Javits. And there were approximately about 8,000 attendees. What we did differently, and this is, again, I cannot highlight this enough, that it is a collaboration between the venue, the show management, and multiple other stakeholders. But that open conversation and the pre-planning is the key to executing something which is easy for the attendee and to understand and then to execute as well. So let me share something with you and I'll walk you through it. Give me 1 second. Okay, it's not this one. Give me 1 second. No, my screen is not working with me. But anyways, let me share what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And this was in collaboration with one of the major sponsors for the event in itself. And this kind of shows that how a collaboration can lead to a successful implementation and actually diverting the numbers. So we had a storyboard where it was talking about that asking the individuals to be part of the solution. And it was a big printed message where it mentioned that you be a part of the solution. And how can you be a part of the solution was divided into two different sections. And one of it was be a part of the solution here at Javits to what we have done here. And it shared the three waste bin system that we had, one for collection of the food scraps, one for the bottles and cans, and one was the trash. The other part of the storyboard was be a part of the solution wherever you are, because we are closer to the ocean than we think. And that was the event sponsor. It was called 11th Hour Racing. But what they did in their side of the section of the storyboard was they had a big QR code printed on it. So the attendee could scan that QR code, and when they scanned it, they were asked to enter their zip code. And based on their zip code, it would provide them the options for composting their food waste. So that was one element of it. Then the other side of it, next to our 3-bin system, was the waste journey for all the waste streams at Javits Center, where we were able to share that what happens once an attendee is throwing something into the waste. What is the next step? How does it move along the process? That how our cleaning teams are involved, how our docking team is involved, the waste hauler, where exactly does that particular stream of the waste ends up? And so, for example, our food waste is not composted. It is actually converted into a engineered bioslurry, which is then used at a digester, anaerobic digester. And from there, it's actually used for generating power and lighting up multiple commercial and residential buildings. Our bottles and cans have a different stream. So it included all the waste streams where the attendee could see it. And alongside with it, there was a digital monitor, which included an animation going on in a loop to just kind of inform the attendee that this goes here, this goes there. And the last engagement to it was all the 3 bins that we had a QR code. When scanned, the attendees were able to experience augmented reality, which is like an immersive way. So it was just like that fun element to it, where the attendees were able to experience that and make sure that they put the right kind of waste in the right bin. So it was really nice. Oh, there, I think I'm able to share it finally. There, can you see it now?
Yeah, now we can. Yeah.
Okay. So this is what I was mentioning, where you see on the top, it says be a part of the solution. That was the overall messaging. Here, use the Javits waste streams and learn how each stream is processed. That was all part of Javits. And to the right that you see and at home, this was all part of the sponsor of the event. This whiteboard that you see under Javits Center, this is talking about all the waste journey for all the 3 different streams that we have. And there is that small monitor with the digital animation playing. And Alex, I've not seen anything come together like this in any of the events recently. So I was very excited about that. And we rolled out another initiative, which was to use the reusables. So all the dishes served during the 3 days of Nest Summit at Javits used the reusable containers. So we had multiple areas to collect those bins as well. Again, that was a pilot program that we launched during Nest.
It's Yash, it's very interesting to see because often, if you really explain what's happening with things afterwards, then you are able to incentivize the participants to work along with you
Absolutely.
on this journey. So I think this educational piece is extremely important, and let's see if this could be also replicated maybe with other events around the world.
I hope so. And all of us combined, everybody, all attendees, we all have our own challenges, but we also have some of those common denominators, I feel, that we can learn from each other. And there are multiple elements that I can learn from all the attendees today, and that we could use it to deploy at Javits Center as well.
Absolutely. Thanks, Yashi.
Thank you.
Any more question? Maybe the last question to Yashi before we wrap up. Otherwise, we will, of course, you're still very welcome to write us an email in case you forgot to ask anything, and then we will, of course, redivert it to Yashi anyway. And it doesn't look like there is anything open at the moment, Yashi. So thank you very much
Thank you.
for your time, for all your explanations. It was really, really inspiring on many levels. And we wish you all the best for the future so that you indeed achieve your goals.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. We will achieve it all together.
Exactly. Absolutely. Thank
We
you so
need to
much,
work.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.